питання від іноземних журналістів, а я тут бачу є англомовний журналіст. Якщо вам потрібен буде переклад, позаду вас є навушничок, там паралельний переклад буде йти. Окей. Ну, на коліна теж. Березня.
It's March 13, Ukraine Media Center confirmed continues its operation. My name is Svetlana Cheparenko, and now we're about to have the presentation of the fourth survey titled Perception of Veterans in Ukrainian Society. Joining us in our studio are Liubomyr Mysiv, Deputy Director of the Sociological Group Rating, and Yulia Kirillova, Head of the Department of Educational and Analytical Work of the Ukrainian Veterans Foundation. Miss Yulia, so what are the main challenges that the veterans are facing, veterans who are growing in numbers when they get back to the society? What are the problems they're facing, and what is the attitude of the population to them? Good afternoon. First of all, I would like to draw everyone's attention to the fact that Ukrainian Veterans Foundation and our departments in particular has the survey of this public sentiment on a regular basis the survey in public and among the veterans. So during our surveys, we asked the veterans what are their biggest concerns, and the first concern that they paid their attention to, the veterans and the active servicemen, are the problems with physical health. So basically there is a huge need for medical support of our veterans and mental health rehabilitation. So those are the problems that our respondents pay most attention to. Then it's probably something that our veterans are afraid of is the lack of understanding by the society of their experience in general, because as we the trust to our defenders is quite high, but when we talk about the veterans, the level of trust is somewhat lower, but the level of stigmatization is way higher. So basically the society is used to comparing our veterans to people who have some psychological disorders, dependencies, and this stigma is something that our defenders are afraid of the most. Mr. Liubomyr, so can you debunk or confirm these statements with sociology? So what are the results of the survey in terms of attitude of our society to the veterans? I'm talking specifically about the stigmatization. Well, I would like to say thank you once again to the Veterans Foundation for this idea. It emerged during the very first days of the war, and for us as sociologists, the topic of the image, the perception of the veterans in the society is quite interesting, because for us it's a 27th wave of our national monitoring. It demonstrates how the dynamic of the public sentiment, first it was perceived with euphoria, like everything is fine, veterans are saints walking on over this earth, and now we see that during the third year of the full-scale invasion, the society is stumbling upon the real problems, social problems, economic problems, psychological problems. Well, we have more than a million people working with the security and defense forces for the time being who will become veterans after our victory. So in the history of the modern Europe, it will be the first example of the load on the state with a weak economy and reintegrating the veterans back into the society, but for the time being there are like numerous problems related to it. Like we in our survey, we gather like live narratives, we talk directly to the representatives of the veterans community, and all those programs, they are integral, we cannot divide them, and this is something that awaits for us in the future. There's a lot of demobilized, there are many people who were fighting since 2014, and unfortunately until 2022 very little number of population initiated them with the term veteran. The evolution of the term veteran itself, it's not like a person who was fighting during the Afghan War or World War II or war in Yugoslavia, but those are the people who live by our side, and they're way younger than those who formulate the policy in their regard, basically. So this fourth wave, it demonstrates the changes, it demonstrates that there are problems which are accumulating and they will only grow in future. The society feels it, they sense it, and they translate it in numbers that we are about to present to you. Let me tell you in brief about the methodology. So we traditionally sample 100 respondents. The question was made by phone, where the mobile communication was available all around Ukraine, non-occupied territories. There are different breakdowns by regional and age characteristic. We were surveying specific groups, like people who have relatives who are veterans since 2014 or since 2014. Well, there is a clear difference in perception of the veterans' problems between the people whose relatives were fighting since 2014 and those fighting since 2024, because those fighting since 2014, they've already experienced all the difficulties, and those fighting since 2024 are only about to experience it. So the evolution of the full-scale war in the society. As of the June 2022, we only had half of the respondents who were saying that their family members, like brother or sister, parents, children, are in the front lines. For the time being, we have a growth within year and a half. We have a 20% growth. Now 70% state that their family members are in one way or another involved in any war activities. So we see there are certain differences related to the distribution of the mobilized ones. It's also related to the place of their residence. Like, let's remember about the migration that we had. So let's do not look at the numbers like west-east. It's first of all related to the fact that 70% of the east was displaced and moved elsewhere. So we have this huge project, Ukraine in War, and we monitor the changes related to IDPs and general trend. We understand that on top of that, some territories are under occupation or under constant shelling, and the population leaves. So those figures, they are not quite objective. Many people who reside currently in the West, they are from the East. It's clear that West is one of the safest territories in Ukraine. So those from the East, they have more family members fighting in the front lines. And the fourth thing I need to emphasize, that veteran is not an elderly. Currently, veterans are the youth, the youngest ones. For your understanding, in our survey, any survey related to war, those are the people who are the most traumatized by the war, from the point of view that their friends, their classmates, someone may have already died, some may have become disabled, someone is still in the front line. So they are the closest to the front line, so to say, closest to the war, and they reflect it in the most intense way. So basically this category is basically waging the war, and they will be the veterans. It's difficult to imagine, but we have to accept it. Those people will have a need not only for social support, but for transformation from the military into the civilian. And that youth, they will need professional transformation, They will need opportunities for development. You know, if they fight for this country is supposed to like reimburse them, like not say, let's not say pay the debt, but provide them with opportunities for development. And if we see the age breakdown, age distribution among the youth, among the youngest one, there is the biggest number of those whose family members or friends are fighting in the front lines. And then admission, we see this difference whether the people admit that they may become veterans in future. Yes, now 41% is stating that they may become veterans. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are about to sign up to the army, to enlist, but based on other research, we see that there is a growing number of respondents who say that the war is going to be long. Like, remember those 2 to 3 weeks, we were laughing about it, but it's normal to have a hope that things will end soon. But on year 3 we realized that this is a complicated situation we ended up in, and we, under the conditions of transformation in the society and decrease of the Western aid, the respondents realized that war may take years, not 1 or 2, but maybe a decade or decades. So some fraction of the society admits it, that they may become veterans, and that's again the youngest category, 18 to 25 years old. They realize that they can be covered by this call too. Well, let's go further. The category of trust. Currently there is still a high level of trust to the armed forces, to the veterans who have already returned, who are about to return, but there are already differences if we check out the key indicators, because again the transformation is going on in the society, because the full-scale war is first of all a social crisis, because you cannot adapt to a catastrophe. You either accept it or try to survive in it. But talking about this distribution, the unity, those differences, they emerge because people get different types of experience during such crises as war is. So the attitude to the veterans does not deteriorate in total, but it becomes a little bit lower in case of answer yes, completely trust. And we understand that the load on the society in terms of distribution of benefits, budget funds, it will be different now. And on top of that, there is the information background related to mobilization. First of all, we see a mass of discussions about justice that is being discussed in the society. Obviously, the image of the military, it changes, and it's not negative, thanks God, so far, but we can already start discussing it, because after the victory there will be a lot of social problems waiting for us. They are already laid as foundations, so to say. For example, IDP, non-IDP had no losses during the war, left the country or stayed inside the country. Those are a lot of social discussions that are waiting for us. We can obviously evade them, but as a sociologist I'm quite pessimistic in these terms, because I know Ukrainian society, well, I don't see any unity so far. I see some attempts, but generally the population remains Ukrainian population who like to quarrel. And I apologize for this word. We have to understand that those quarrels are stimulated from outside, because it's easy to manipulate people, manipulate the public sentiment, and that's why in future we are supposed to forecast this problem and rather not try to evade it. So let me omit this part. So problems of the veterans adaptation, that was the question that we were asking during our previous survey. Now we've transformed it with a bigger number of problems. So evaluation of the degrees of risks, so expectations of the population in terms of the problems that veterans are going to face as they come back home. So this is something that we were discussing previously during our previous surveys, that psycho-emotional support, the transformation, adaptation of a person who experienced some difficult conditions of death all around them, and now they transition to the peaceful life. But people may still live under stress, and they need to adapt to the civilian life and to accept the fact that there can be life beyond war. So another problem is, and the most important, is the problems with the physical health and difficulties in obtaining medical aid. And if, for example, after 2014 we had little number of such persons, now we have a lot of those who has become disabled as a result of participation in active battle operations. And another third problem that I've mentioned, it's related to the previous one, but there are questions to the presence of the inclusive space. You know, so far Ukraine and inclusiveness is like two different things. We're moving in that direction, but the inclusiveness is not so widespread. You know, in the big cities we can see those low sidewalks or ramps or other inclusion measures, but in smaller cities there's way more barriers, way more problems. So it's not about people only riding the wheelchairs, but it's also about the perception of those people who have those disabilities, their perception by the society. So far they seem to be a stigmatized category of population. Well, not stigmatized by the society, but rather by themselves, because they have no confidence about themselves, and people really punish themselves internally, psychologically, for being disabled. I mean, even if you don't get this disability as a result of war, it's a difficult psychological problem, and they need help in these areas. So like the society pities them, but it's not about the pity, it's about perception of them as people. So it's a part of education program, but it takes time. We understand it's a Soviet heritage. We were living in different conditions where the disabled people, where the state tried to hide the disabled as if they don't exist. But you see, now this risk exists. Well, it's not a problem, it's a risk. Another risk is the social benefits. Well, getting those certificates from different agencies and proving that you're a veteran. Well, this culture of different certificates and applications is the whole thing. It's a quest and challenge, not only in the armed forces but everywhere. It still remains a problem in our country. It's a bureaucracy. Another significant problem are conflicts in the families of the military. So talking about psychological adaptation, once again, those people require adaptation. They need to be reintegrated back into society. The society has to understand their experience, but again, it's a road with two-side movement. The veterans themselves, they say that we need to accept the civil life, and civil life is no war. That's a whole different thing with different rules and different conditions and laws operating there. So again, that's the movement from two opposite sides. Well, lack of understanding in the society, that's something that I've mentioned. Yet another risk is the absence of job. We understand in the conditions of economic crisis there will be no many opportunities for jobs, and integrating a person who used to be a military, who lost their training, who lost their skills, they need new training, the new perception in the collective, because first of all, again, it's the imposition of communications. Another problem is the abuse of drugs and alcohol, which is as a result of other social problems. Well, another problem is the suicide and problems with the law, and also lack of correspondence with the proper experience. So as we see, the dynamic is only growing. All of the indicators we have included within 2 or 4 waves, they are all growing. Why? But again, we are in year 3 of the full-scale invasion, and the perception of social problems is only jeopardizing. I mean, during all of the surveys, not only related to the veterans or to the war, that's a forecastable and a predictable story. The pressure of social and economic problems, not only the military problems, but social and economic, but multiplied by the information background, like corruption scandals that are being discussed in the media, the justice issues, they only reinforce the focus. Why I'm doing this way and someone else is doing way better. So again, the challenges that are awaiting for us in future is the communication, the differentiation of the people by the level of their income, because as the practice witnesses, the ideas of equality, justice in the post-war society are real present, because there's a lot of problems emerging at the same time, and wise policy would be to transform the country with the count of certain problems, losses, but how to transform the country in an easy way. Like, in totalitarian states, everything is easy. You can just move the disabled out of the city, tell everybody to shut down and keep silent, but in democratic societies, it's a matter of discussions in the society. It's a matter of transformation of the ideas, political opinions, things related to the elections, getting some powers in office, like some development of some populistic ideas, which people will be prone to accepting, because the society is susceptible to propaganda and easy solutions under conditions like that, under conditions when they are traumatized. Yet another part is the expectation of the problems that are growing on the background of other problems that are deteriorating, because the economic situation is not improving. The problems with the jobs, we have a huge demand for mobilization of large number of males, is the pressure on economy. We have migration abroad, which happened again not among the elderly, but the most active categories of the society have left, young women who study abroad, and it all creates the vacuum of the workforce that will emerge in future. And again, that's another thing, where to get money. All of the indicators have grown, both after the second and during the fourth wave, so they've all become of more negative nature. So talking about another part, demographic distribution, you can discuss it by yourself on an expert level. It's clear that the biggest risks, if we talk about the category of population who have family members in the front lines, are among those who were fighting in ATO. They've already walked that path, they have understanding of those problems, they sense all of the problems in a more intense way, rather than those who are fighting currently. Like now, you can only become veteran after the full-scale invasion, rather than after the operation of the joint forces or anti-terroristic operation of which started in 2014. So in response to the question whether the government fulfills or does not fulfill their obligations in front of the veterans, the estimates are lower and lower. And it's not only related to veterans, but to all areas of government policies, related to the famous scandals that happened within the last half a year. And unfortunately, the trust in government institutions is in negative trend. Probably it will improve, but for the time being, as our legendary president was saying, we have what we have. In my personal opinion, the things may change. This evaluation may be a little bit too generalized, but that social load that is being expected, and the absence of understanding or lack of understanding of the veterans' problems by the society, this movement in the opposite directions, it creates more problems now. Like, let's see it on the second graph, specifically among the socially vulnerable categories of population, like youth among those who have veteran friends, they see that there is the problem of lack of understanding of the veterans by the society. It's not critical so far, but under the conditions that we live in, it helps this indicator remain in the positive trend, but generally it's more about the general social policy by the veterans implemented by the state and how the state will be able to balance the well-being of veterans and those who are not veterans. So again, it's a matter of justice and distribution. This is something that is going to emerge with time. As you know, this phase we never sent you there, so we're never are supposed to be liable. We know it circulates as a negative meme in the society. Talking about awareness, you know, it's year 3 of the full-scale invasion and people are better informed about the veterans' problems. I don't think it's a problem. I think it's more of a challenge that now we can talk about the similarity of the servicemen and veterans' problems, like provision of medical aid, social guarantees. We understand that being on service is one thing, but the problems are still similar. We're not talking about rehabilitation, psychological, or mental health support. So whether it's the active serviceman who needs mental health support, maybe not the same type as a post-traumatic story, but it's year 3 of the full-scale invasion. And the problems may still be similar. We may segregate them, or otherwise we may find some touching points. Many veterans for the time being are still active servicemen, so again, awareness is growing, people know more. Maybe they do not differ, those general problems, but again, as long as it's our agenda, we see that the situation is like this. I appreciate your attention and I'm ready to open any and all of your questions. Well, it was quite an interesting research. I would like to get back to what you were saying about the attitude to the image of the veteran that was created in the society. We've seen it on the grams that the attitude is deteriorating. What is the key factor that impacts it? Well, once again, I would like to get back to the fact that there are in my opinion, 3 key problems. First is the information problem related to mobilization, the creation of this background. You see, there is a small fall, not in the trust, but into the level of trust to the armed forces, and veterans are a part of that machine. They fall under this trend. On the other hand, there are many social problems and failure to solve those problems, psychological, social problems, conflicts in the families, absence of jobs, and stuff like that. It creates a negative image for those people. They end up under different type of influence, and this image, it only deteriorates, and it creates this difficult background. We don't have this problem so far. It's not like half of the population is saying that the image of the veterans is declining or deteriorating, but there is the competition for distribution of the social benefits. You know, the poorest categories of population, they need some support too, and they have lack of this acceptance, like we are the pensioners and those youth are entitled to those payments, and we, like the pensioners, are supposed to like not to get those funds. We were working too, you know, we have to wait in line, meanwhile they go without the line, without queue and stuff like that. Like very plain social problems, very mundane. Thank you very much, Mr. Liubomyr. And Ms. Yulia, why is it important for the Ukrainian Veterans Foundation to track those trends, and how are you going to use this information in your work? Well, look, first of all, I would like to say that such surveys are needed not only by Ukrainian Veterans Foundation, but thanks to surveys like this, we can track the sentiment of population that reflects certain problems in the society, and both the state and civil sector are provided with opportunity to develop the tools for timely and efficient solution of this social problem. Talking about the Ukrainian Veterans Foundation, it's a government-controlled institution. It's a part of the Ministry for Veterans Affairs, and basically we support our defenders. We work with them, and the main area of our activity is to provide the financial support to the veterans, members of their families, and civil organizations that provide services to the veterans. And to make sure that we understand the needs of our target audience better, we make those surveys. Also, I would like to promote, using this opportunity, the fact that Ukrainian Veterans Foundation has started a program of funding for veterans businesses. So basically the veteran entrepreneurs may take part in our bid for funding of their business, and they can get like up to 1 million hryvnias to procure equipment for their manufacturing capacity. So back to our survey, about 64% of our defenders and veterans were saying that after return to civil life they would like to establish their own business. And this is where our profound survey has started, survey of our veterans entrepreneurship, its development. We were analyzing international experience to develop efficient programs for support of our defenders who want to open their own business. Basically, we understand that in view of the general statistics, there cannot be 64% of entrepreneurs, but at least half of them may develop their own business and thus employ our defenders, both male and female, because as we see, the degree of risk of the problems with employment will be quite high, and those people will need requalification. They will need employment, and their brothers and sisters in arms who have similar experience are the ones who can help them adapt to the civil lives way better. As we see, the understanding of the problems of the veterans by the society is growing, and the level of risks that the society is saying about or stating about it reflects their experience of communication with the veterans. For example, we see that there are problems related to the conflicts within the families. Ukrainian Veterans Foundation has a mental health support hotline for veterans and their family members, and I was analyzing the statistic of calls. And basically, if we compare it with previous periods, I can observe that the number of calls related to some family problems like domestic violence is gradually growing. And again, it's yet another sign to have not only the government but also the civil sector, civil society who develops some services for the veterans to react to it with some of their problems, because we understand that 1 million of veterans that we are about to have is a huge number. We understand that it's not a problem of some imaginary state. It's the task of all of our society to reintegrate, to find common ground, because it's not only the veterans who need to reintegrate back into civil life, but it's also the civil society that is supposed to reintegrate into the life of the state that is waging a war, and those are the new realities that we have to get used to. And if we talk, for example, now it's March 2024 is the 10th anniversary of the beginning of war in Ukraine, and talking about the March of 2014, the children who back then were 8 or 9 years now are forced to be mobilized into the ranks of the armed forces of Ukraine. That's the growing generation that was growing up during the war, and they understand that is their task and is their mission to make sure that they and their state survives. And if we check out the demographic breakdown, when we were asking people if they admit that they can become veterans in future, we should pay attention to the fact that it's not only 18 to 35 years youth who were responding yes, but there is a large number of women. There is a growing percentage of women, 20% of women admit that they may become veterans in future. So it's not a problem, it's the task of the whole society to get used to the new realities and to effectively react to those challenges. So there is a task. I liked what Mr. Liubomyr has said, that both society and veterans should go towards each other. So are there any global programs launched on the level of the society that would teach the society how to live in this new reality? Well, basically it's difficult to answer that it's only this program exclusively that aims at having the society adapt to the veterans and the veterans reintegrate back into civil life. But if we talk about reintegration, if we talk about respect to the veterans, it's not only about some words of appreciation or greeting on some date, but it's the creation of the inclusive barrier-free space. Because for the time being, it's not only veterans who suffer the trauma and disabilities. There is a high level of civilian population, high percentage of civilian population that is affected by the same type of injuries. Many children are suffering too. So it's about the creation of inclusive space. Then it's about creation of the joint window for the veterans in the centers for administrative services. So it's one of those steps on the way of creation of certain culture of appreciation, because again it's about respect, and it's about the fact that we respect what you were doing and what you keep doing, and we try to create those conditions for you. And also it's about the development of veterans policy, in which not only those who make decisions are involved, but a broad circle of civil organizations too. We have to keep talking about that. It's not only about how we should communicate or properly approach the veteran and thank them for their service. Thank you very much. Do journalists have any questions to our speakers? Anastasia Rakuta, Ukrinform. I'm having a question to Miss Yulia. Can you please tell us, are the Ukrainian employers ready to accept veterans, to employ veterans, and is the state ready to implement the program that would be ready or to help the veterans to reintegrate in their new place of employment? Thank you very much for this question. Last year we had a survey among the veterans and among the employers, about possible problems or obstacles they may be facing during their employment, or the veterans may be facing during their employment, and the majority of the employers were saying that yes, they respect the veterans, they're ready to employ them. However, as soon as we were asking them if they have any programs for adaptation of the veterans in their new workplaces, almost 90% were saying no, but they would plan to implement such programs. As we were asking them when, whether it's today or tomorrow, they were mostly saying that they plan to implement such training programs after the victory, after the veterans are already employed. But as the experience proves, those employers with whom we develop the adaptation programs, they all need improvement. So no single program that we create fully corresponds to that field of work where the veterans work, whether it's some industry, or maybe it's a publishing house or a school. So there can be no universal recipe. There are always some specific, some unique experience, whether it depends on the region or the area of work. So the general recommendations are possible, but when they will be ready, unfortunately, I cannot answer you. The next question will be in English, so if you need translation, please use the terminal.
Good morning. Thank you for this very interesting topic, which I think is central for any society at war, as it is Ukraine, but it's, we saw the same problem in Israel, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, the question of the society at war. And I would say, yes, I agree with, sorry, my name is Lorenzo Cremonesi, writing for the major Italian daily Corriere della Sera. Would say that I agree with Miss Ruslana that, of course, all the society is under stress, but the veterans are a very specific category. The people who are not, that don't have, maybe their problem are even less tragic than a family with lose a house and some member of the family which can be under bomb. But the veterans are soldiers who go on the front line. Some of them are volunteer who are there now for 25 months or 24, so in any case, a long time. So it's a very specific problem. Generally, they are men. The big majority of the soldiers who are on the front line here are men. So, but I have some question. In order to define a phenomenon, sometimes we need numbers. Otherwise, we get lost. So I would like to ask to Mr. Liubomyr, if he can be specific, if he can give us some number. I have a list of questions on the number. First of all, how many veterans are we talking about? Can you give us an idea? We know that more or less there are 1 million men mobilized. How many of them are veterans? Veteran for us means people who had been demobilized, can be very young, as you said, were not soldiers anymore, and they tried to reintegrate into society. Otherwise, we are talking about soldiers, which is another. We are talking about soldiers who left, who are not soldiers anymore. They can be soldiers in the future, maybe. But so, first of all, how many are they? Not a precise number, but what is a number? The idea of the number. Second, average age. Can you tell us what is the average age? They are 20, 30, 45. What is the age of this veteran who have been demobilized? Number of disables. We have a lot of number. We hear a lot of number. Are you able to give us an idea of how many are they? The disabled, the people who have been heavily, gravely injured, and now they have to recover, etc. And then, as we say, and I think it's very important, in this category, we put the post-traumatic stress. When we go on the trenches, on the front line, this problem is a major problem. People who are not physically affected, but they are under emotional traumatic stress. That's very important. And these people can be, as you say, they can be alcoholic, they can take drugs, they can be really marginal in the society, a problem for the society. Another question, you mentioned the question of the suicide. It's not the first time that we hear that. Suicide, can you give us an idea? We heard many times, even Ukrainian press talking about suicide. How many? Can you give us an idea? Is it growing? Are they less? Are they more? Comparing last year? We also heard, and I remember talking with young soldier in Zaporizhia hospital, divorce. There's another social problem. Family which break down because of the psychological problem, because the wife maybe go abroad. Soldiers told us, we are here, soldier men, we've been abandoned by our women. I heard many times this sentence, which is kind of a taboo, of course. But can you give us an idea? And of course, unemployment. And a last thing, the question of the demobilization law or mobilization law, which is the same face of the same coin, people are very upset. Soldiers, societies, families, even if they want to fight, they are very upset. We had here a press conference with one of the members of the parliament.
We didn't have a lot of time, so
sorry.
the
Okay.
question.
So can you give us an answer on this question, especially on the numbers, on the figures? Thank you.
Я українською відповім, на жаль, я все зрозумів, дякую.
I will reply in Ukrainian. I understand everything you've asking. I cannot give you some statistics as a sociologist. Maybe Yulia has anything to add if it exists. But based on our survey, well, we're talking about the phenomena of Ukrainian veterans. So today, let me repeat it. Let me get back to this figure. The full-scale war, according to the calculations of the Ministry of Defense, we have more than 1,100,000 people serving. Like everybody who gets back from this big war will be the veterans, and it will be the huge layer of the society. Well, this is a discussion of whom we recognize as a veterans. Again, the phenomena of today is that people, like, you know, the war started in 2014, let me remind you. Those who were serving in 2014, they are the active servicemen with a veteran status. One friend of mine got this veteran status recently, and he's the active serviceman. He's a medic. So again, it's a phenomena of today. It's not like a small fraction of people, and more people will be demobilized. So talking about the exact figures now, the exact number of veterans, it's impossible. Talking about psychological problems, injuries, those numbers will be definitely growing. We cannot forecast the amount of the psychological problems because the trauma may be different. We don't know the scale of the war, and we don't know what will be the consequences. You know, different people may experience it in different way. It will be influencing the post-traumatic history too. So talking about the divorce statistics, you know, is difficult in Ukraine to maintain statistics in general. I hope it still exists on some level, and we can like draw some imaginary number somehow soon. But again, the information about the injuries is classified now. Those figures that you want to get, unfortunately, we don't have them. And on the other hand, we cannot talk about them because the war is still not over. And in a year, those figures may be bigger, maybe twice bigger. Miss Yulia, do you have anything to add? Well, I basically agree with Mr. Liubomyr. The country that is waging a war cannot disclose such statistics. It's very difficult to talk about things like that. Talking about statistics of the number of suicides, it did not exist even before the full-scale invasion because such data was never analyzed, and basically those who, for example, if we talk about the Ministry of Interior, because it's under their jurisdiction, when they document the facts of suicide, it's difficult for them to understand whether the person who killed themselves is a veteran or not. Maybe it's not quite correct to segregate the people who ended their lives like this in a way like that. Well, thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. Let me remind you, we had the presentation of the fourth wave of survey titled Perception of Veterans in Ukrainian Society. Ukraine Media Center will be back on air tomorrow. Stay tuned. Thank you.